Hello everyone, I'm CrypticFox, and today we're talking gas management in oxygen not included. Managing the gas within your colony is going to be one of the most important things you can do, in part because oxygen itself is a gas, and your duplicants need that in order to survive. While they're breathing in the oxygen, they're producing carbon dioxide, which you can see is pooling down here at the bottom area in my base, but there's also other types of gas you'll have to deal with in terms of hydrogen, which I have actually collected at the top of the base up here. You'll run into chlorine, which you may have to deal with. Ideally, you want to keep that out of your base because there isn't currently a system in the alpha in order to manage that. And then you'll also have to deal with things like contaminated oxygen. And there are other gas chemicals out there that you'll deal with, but those are the ones you'll deal with most commonly. And then also steam, which is just a vaporized water in oxygen. The amount of pressure that you have in your base is going to help control where the gases go, but in general, they have a preferred flow. Hydrogen prefers to sort itself to the top, carbon dioxide prefers to sort itself to the bottom, and then you'll get your oxygen and your contaminated oxygen floating somewhere in the middle. Steam will tend to rise just slightly above that, and chlorine will sit just below that. So, in general, for the three most common gases you'll run with, hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and oxygen, they split themselves into tiers. But the amount of pressure that you have in any given area of your base is going to impact where that gas collects. Carbon dioxide prefers to sink towards the bottom, but as you build up concentrations of carbon dioxide, you have to have sufficient pressure of oxygen in the core portion of your base in order to help keep that gas pressed down. Similarly with hydrogen, you can see that at the top portion here, I have very high concentrations of hydrogen, but it's staying towards the top of this area because below that, I have an even higher concentration of pure oxygen. In general, you have a couple of options when dealing with the gases. So you need to produce enough oxygen in order for your duplicants to continue breathing. You can do that through the use of algae deoxidizers, which will produce oxygen in exchange for algae. You can also use algae terrariums, which I don't have any built of at the moment, but those will also exchange a small amount of oxygen in exchange for some carbon dioxide, which they'll scrub out of the air for you. You can move carbon dioxide directly by using the air scrubber, which will take the carbon dioxide from the air. In exchange for fresh water, it will produce contaminated water, which can then be used to remove the carbon dioxide directly. We also have air deodorizers, which can be used to strip contaminated oxygen out of the existing oxygen. Now, this will also produce oxygen in and of itself. The trouble is, these sorts of scrubbers are very dependent on sand, and when later in the game, as you run out of sand, it becomes much more difficult to operate them. Alternatively, you can just move gases around to different areas of your base. In this particular base, I have a ventilation setup where I'm using a gas pump in order to move oxygen that I'm producing using my electrolyzers down through a ventilation system that supplies oxygen to the greater proportion of my base. Using this method, I can control the hydrogen that's produced by the electrolyzer because each electrolyzer produces a quantity of hydrogen, so 112 gallons per second of hydrogen for every 888 gallons per second of oxygen that it's capable of producing, as long as it's supplied with water. But in my initial base, I had these spread around different areas of the base, and what I was running into was that my base was filling up with hydrogen. So if you control these by putting them in an area where you can contain the hydrogen, then you can just take the clean air and pump it directly out into your base and use that as a method of ventilation instead of having individual placements of algae deoxidizers or individual placements of the electrolyzer. Gas vents have a point at which they'll say that they're overpressurized, and then theoretically the air isn't supposed to continue flowing through them. I haven't noticed any significant difference in the alpha, and that might be something that's going to be changing later. The gas does continue to flow. Once it overpressurizes once, it will continue to have a label that says it's overpressurized regardless of the pressure of the gas that's around it. But in general, it will say that the vent is overpressurized if the gas that's immediately around the vent is in the neighborhood of 1,800 to 2,000. Sometimes you'll have instances where you have multiple gases that are mixed into a single area. So, for example, in this top portion of my base, again, I have mixed in here hydrogen as well as oxygen. And you could conceivably have a third or a fourth gas if you've mixed multiple different areas into one space. At times, you want to use the pump in order to move the gases to a different area, but you don't want to move all the gases. You only want one of the gases that's contained in the space. And that's where the gas filter comes in handy. By installing a gas filter, when you select it, it allows you to choose the type of gas that you're going to separate. So you choose one particular gas, and the filter will make a point of removing that gas and sending it down a third line that's not the same, or that is off the main line. So in this instance, I have this gas pump sitting in an area that contains hydrogen and oxygen. I want the oxygen to return to the base, but I want the hydrogen to stay in the room. So the gas pump I have set up through the ventilation pipe to the gas filter. The gas filter is set to hydrogen. So when it encounters hydrogen in the flow of gas, it will separate that and send it up this pipe to this vent, which is currently overpressurized. However, the gas will still flow through it. The oxygen, on the other hand, will continue down the ventilation pipe and will continue out into the greater portion of my base. This pump happens to be sitting at a very high concentration of oxygen, so the likelihood of getting hydrogen within the mix is very low, but there could potentially be some that's produced by the electrolyzer next to it that ends up making it into the pump. So this is more of a safeguard to avoid getting unnecessary hydrogen in the rest of my base. When you place down the filter, there are 3 different colored ports on it. The green port is the input, and that's where you want to send anything that's coming from the pump into the gas filter. The second port is for the gas that's currently being set to filter out. So if I were to choose oxygen instead of hydrogen, then oxygen would go up this pipe and out this port up here. And then the white port on the other side is the general output for the gas, and this is where the greater proportion of the gas will flow, based on what you're removing or you're sorting out. You may want to have this set up in a way where this vent isn't going just to a single place, but maybe you instead, such as I have in this other line, you want to send it to a different use. So in this case, I have the pump set up to gather the hydrogen that's located at the top, to pass it into the filter. The filter is choosing hydrogen to send down the separate line, which will go to my hydrogen generator. The main output, in the meanwhile, will take any oxygen that it happens to catch in here, and it will send it into the normal flow of oxygen. So if we turn the pump on, we can see that in action. Hydrogen flows down the pipe, gets caught by the filter, pushed down to the generator to produce the power. Now there's a very high concentration of hydrogen up here, so the likelihood of getting any oxygen that it needs to send down to the main line is again extremely low. However, I have it set up that way just on the off chance that I'm running the pump when it gets to the point where the hydrogen concentration in the top portion of this room gets to be very low. Another method for controlling your gas pressurization is the use of airlock doors. There are 2 different types, of course. We have the mechanized airlock, which opens automatically, and then the manual airlock. Both of them seem to perform the same function. However, the manual airlock is slower to open and close, where the mechanized airlock seems to be much more quick. This will help you maintain the pressure that's contained within your room. So inside the room, we're seeing gas pressures around 1,616. And immediately on the other side of the door, we're seeing gas pressure at 67.3. There happens to be a little bit of hydrogen located out here. But even when we get down to the oxygen, it's at 42.8. 26 between these 2 airlock doors, and then when we get out to this portion, we're getting back into the breathable oxygen at 137, and so on. So this will help separate and keep the different gas pressures. You may want to use these when you're accessing an external portion of your base. So here I have one that maintains oxygen at 146 on this side, and on the other side it's only at 37.3. So this airlock sort of seals off my base from the exterior area, but you can also use it to separate different types of gases. In general, you want to keep your carbon dioxide under control to keep it out of the space that the duplicants need to breathe. You want to keep your hydrogen as separate as you can, whether you're collecting it in a single place or in multiple places. And use the pumps to remove any gases that you don't want in your given areas. In the early term of the game, when sand is plentiful, you can use the air deodorizer to keep control of your contaminated oxygen, which will remove that and help replace the oxygen. But later on, when sand becomes more scarce, then controlling the gas is much more important. And airlock doors, whether it's the mechanized airlock or the manual airlock, can help you keep control of the inflow of gases that might be arriving in your base, even if you have to place a pump in between the doors to strip out any gases that might come through when the outer door opens. One other component that you'll find with moving gases is there's also a gas valve that will allow you to set the amount of pressure that's being sent through the line. If in particular you need to control the amount of gas that's moving from point A to point B, the pump itself moves gas at a rate of, I believe, 500 gallons per second. Yeah, so it moves 500 gallons per second through the pump, but that may be more gas than you want to move at any given moment. Maybe the pressure in the area that you're getting will drop too low if it's moving that much gas at any given time. So you can use this gas valve in order to set the amount of flow that's going through the valve. Now, in general, once this flow is set, the maximum seems to cap out at 100 gallons per second. And when you initially place it, the options seem to be much more broad. However, once you set the pressure at anything lower than 100, it seems like it maxes out at 100. And if you need something different than that, you may have to remove it and then reinstall it. Similar to the gas valve, again, there's a green input and a white input. The green input is for gases coming in, and the white port is for gases leaving the gas filter. If you are sending any gas through a pipe, you must have a ventilation vent at the end of the pipe. Without this vent, the gas simply won't move through the pipe at all. So if you find a situation where you have a gas gas pump that is working, and it seems like it's connected up to a pipe that should be moving the gas from point A to point B, if it's missing a connection at the other end, either to a piece of machinery or to a gas vent, then you will find that the gas won't move, and that's probably where you should look if you're having trouble with it not passing any of the gases through. That's a simple basic overview of gas management in Oxygen Not Included. As we move into further development of the game beyond the alpha, there'll be many more gases we'll have to manage. As you move into higher cycles in your game and you're exploring farther away from your colony, you'll encounter other gases in the space. However, most of those you won't have to do any specific management for, other than trying to keep them out of your living environment so that your duplicants can continue to breathe. Hope you enjoyed the video and you come back and check out more of these. I'm, as always, CrypticFox. I'll see all of you next time.